Hello, ELD with Brainstorm MTG, and we've got some Storm matchups for you this week. This is from the Scholars Legacy event that took place on February 10th. That is a Saturday tournament, typically one of the larger events that we hold, not as big as the quarterly Tabernacle events. Those have been even more greatly attended. And we here have Jerry Me, or Jerry Meme as he is becoming known as, on his kind of trademark deck Sneak and Show. And here we have a hand, not a great keep, it would appear. We have Omniscience, Force of Will times 2, Flusterstorm in the mix. So knowing that he is up against Storm, he has access to 2 or 3 counter spells. He's hoping that that's going to be enough and he will just need to draw into mana. But that hand is not going anywhere without a soul land or additional mana sources. So we will see how that works out. And then on the Storm side, we've got basic Island Go, so no real explosive starts possible with a lack of mana on Sneak and Show's side, and of course all of those counter spells, which are really going to restrict Storm's ability to just win the game. And here we go, another land. Volcanic Island joins the fray. And the clock is ticking. If Jerry is able to hit a City of Traders or Ancient Tomb, he actually has Show and Tell for Emrakul or Show and Tell for Sneak Attack, though Emrakul the more likely line here, seeing as how he would not have red to activate Sneak Attack. Show and Tell for Sneak Attack, one of those lines that can really get people. The hasty bonus from putting in the creature off of Sneak Attack certainly makes Emrakul a heck of a lot better, and even makes Gristlebrand better in that you get to draw those extra 7 cards after he connects. And Brainstorm here. We'll see if he can assemble perhaps the best combo in Legacy, Brainstorm with the fetch land. Probably the only negative thing I could find in my heart for Brainstorm is the fact that when you do Brainstorm and don't have a way of shuffling and you just don't have the goods, then you are effectively, you're out of the game well beforehand. And then we have another basic island. All right, so no shuffle. If a third land is on top of that deck or in Jerry's hand, we will see some fireworks from his side of the board soon. And Lotus Petal. Let's see if this is going to be comboing off or just... Okay, so this is dangerous. We have a Dark Ritual. Storm 2, that would get us to 3 black mana, opening up a lot of possibilities. Of course, we know Flusterstorm and Force of Will in hand. Dark Ritual, one of those very difficult to play against cards in Storm. It can turn on all of the discard, potentially in multiples, but it does feel so much better to be able to counter the Infernal Tutor or the Dark Petition, the decks that run Burning Wish, kind of that card that really ties the turn together, the Past in Flames, the Ad Nauseam, the card that really appears to be the thing killing you, but more often than not, it's actually the mana that will lead you to victory or defeat. And there we have an Infernal Tutor being played defensively, grabbing Cabal Therapy. Still 2 black mana floating. And the Storm count is 2 so far. So Flusterstorm would be effective at countering the first Cabal Therapy, unless a Ritual is also in the mix. Responding to Flusterstorm with a burst of Rituals, often devastating. It is sometimes, though, just not worth it. Flusterstorm is not quite Mind Break Trap, but the fact that you can, in fact, pay the 1 does sometimes come into play. More often than not, though, it does actually do its job. A little bit of a back and forth in the comments this past week, specifically about Mind Break Trap. particularly in Leovold lists, was the general back and forth about whether or not Flusterstorm or Mindbreak Trap is better in that deck. Of course, if you're tapped out with Leovold and they do Tendrils you, having a draw toward Mindbreak Trap so much better. But of course, Flusterstorm is better versus so many more decks. And here we have the Cabal Therapy going down to 1 black mana, playing that Lotus Petal, making Flusterstorm that much better. Or at least that much better at countering things. And we'll see here, Jerry's got a real decision here. His hand is under attack, and that is his only line of defense here. He is still some ways away from assembling a threatening board state. And we'll see which counter magic he decides to use. Unlikely. Oh, Brainstorm here. Very interesting. So adding to the storm count and walking away from Flusterstorm. Now as a Storm player, the two problems are those 2 Force of Wills, and Cabal Therapy must be countered now. Of course, both players here know that there's another Cabal Therapy in hand. So this is a very dangerous situation right now. Cabal Therapy can be so good against the best possible defensive hands, and then Cabal Therapy can come in and get multiple copies out of there. So we've got a Force of Will pitching Jace the Mind Sculptor. Of course, Jace has been a card played a bit more in Sneak and Show as of late. It's an incredible card in the mirror. Of course, it is a bit slow for a Storm matchup. He does it all. He draws cards, he can win the game, he can remove threats, and in a pinch he can pitch to Force. So we've got Force on Cabal Therapy. So it's really just a question is, does Jerry have another Force of Will in hand? We know Flusterstorm is still in there, or perhaps on top of the deck. And it looks like it is just going to be off to the races. Dark Ritual into Cabal Ritual. That's going to go from 3 to 6 black mana. And the Storm is lethal here. And Infernal Tutor. Storm is 11, and Jerry recognizes that that is the game. A Tendrils is something that could have been fetched there, or the Past in Flames if necessary to get around a potential card like Mindbreak Trap. Either way, Mindbreak Trap would have been problematic. It was not there, not a card that you really see main decked, and that is it. So game 1, Storm besting Sneak and Show. Of course, Sneak and Show has a ton of game in this matchup. It may actually be one of Sneak and Show's worst matchups. However, it does have a ton of game. It's got the ability to combo out rapidly. You're talking about turn 1, 2, or 3 very commonly being able to assemble Omniscience along with Gristlebrand, Emrakul, and friends. It is very, very powerful. One of the best decks in the format. And this is always an interesting matchup. Storm generally just being a little bit faster, and the discard of Storm just so happens to line up well versus Sneak and Show, in that not only does it clear away counters, which is kind of the main reason that you're running discard in Storm, is to make sure that your spells are going to resolve, but the other side of that equation is Sneak and Show is a multi-card combo to assemble. So when you're talking about Show and Tell and a creature, or Sneak Attack plus a creature, Show and Tell, Omniscience and a creature, the discard can be extremely good at breaking up that combo and buying additional turns. So not only does the discard clear the way for my combo, it also prevents Sneak and Show from winning in a timely fashion in the case where they don't have the counter magic. So yeah, it's a very interesting matchup. I really enjoy this type of magic, where both players are playing extremely powerful decks, taking very different approaches to the game. And they can very often turn into very decision-heavy, like real, what I consider to be quality Magic, where both people's decisions are what are going to determine the outcome. So a little bit of substitution there. The Cabal Ritual, Cabal Therapy coming out, went into the deck shortly and then came out. Actually did a split on the art for those using the Judgment Cabal Therapies in the main deck, and then one of the reprints, I believe EMA it was, in the sideboard. Just makes sideboarding a little bit easier to be able to identify that sideboard card. I think a lot of players prefer to keep all of their art uniform. In the case of a card like Hymn to Torok, I generally would rather just kind of defend against my own error of potentially leaving in a Cabal Therapy and having a deck list that is incorrect. And that is one of the only ways that you can actually still get a game loss in that regard. If you did have your 4th Cabal Therapy in your main deck in Game 1, that would actually end up being a game loss. One of the only ways now, because they did really loosen up that penalty. So if your main deck is incorrect now, it is no longer an auto game loss. Now they just swap out the card. All right, 2, 4, 6. All right, so lots of goods there. Some lands, an Infernal Tutor, a Lion's Eye Diamond. That may be good enough to keep on the Storm side, and not quite seeing Jerry's hand here. Going to be kept in mystery. A little bit of suspense can be good for the drama here. So we've got 2 Lion's Eyes, and Jerry throwing it back. During this first mulligan of the match, going to go ahead and thank Scholars Games in Brockton, Massachusetts. The owner, Pyle Souza, is a huge fan of Vintage, Legacy, any of the Eternal formats, and has really dedicated the store towards supporting those tournaments and those scenes. With Pauper on the rise, that's something we're going to be looking at as well. That's another format where you can run 4 Brainstorm, so I am starting to set aside some cards for that. The only format where you can play 4 Gush, so that is very exciting. All right, Jerry really not getting the type of hands that he wants here. This is rather grim. It's very difficult for the Sneak and Show player to have all of the goods necessary for the win and to be able to have a way of slowing down the Storm player. So at 5 cards here, we kind of have to figure out early if he's got a hand that has got some disruption or if he's just trying to speculatively assemble his combo. And we've got a Scry. We'll see if that stays. It does not. Generally a good sign. And City of Traders, Lotus Petal. We may be in for a hurting here. Lotus Petal and a pass. So there we go. Jerry has the mana he needs to show and tell, and he got both Lotus Petals out of hand, kind of avoiding any type of discard. Cabal Therapy naming Lotus Petal unlikely, but if you do see the hand with Probe first, it is a very powerful play to be able to get 2 cards for 1 in this type of matchup. And then it looks like we've got City of Traders tapping a fetch land. So we've got 5 mana available. A Through the Breach or a Sneak Attack. Perhaps. No, we've got Brainstorm with 2 floating. So a bit of a desperation play here from Jerry. Feels the noose tightening and is trying to make something happening. Very interesting. Conserving those Lotus Petals, valuing the petal on board more than the shuffle from the fetch land. And then on the Storm side, a slow start here. We've got a couple of Flooded Strands. Brainstorm from Jerry. Infernal Tutor, one of those cards that can really suffer from variance at times. There are times where you've just got 2 lands in hand and it just can't get the job done because you are unable to go Hellbent. All the other spells in the deck generally pretty easy to get out of your hand. Rituals, fast mana, no problem there. Brainstorms and cantrips very often can turn themselves into more fast mana, but lands, there's just not a lot you can do other than get rid of them with your Brainstorms. Or just naturally play a land per turn until you've got no more in hand, which at this point, Jerry, only 3 cards. Still dangerous, however. 3 mana, all that's necessary from Sneak and Show to just win the game off of a Show and Tell. And there we have a Cabal Therapy. Therapy targeting Jerry. And looks like we've got a Force of Will, an Omniscience, and a Spell Pierce. So a bunch of counter spells. Flusterstorm, the named card. There is a whiff there. So Infernal is going to need to be very careful of both the Spell Pierce and the Force of Will. For sideboarding here, we've got Hope of Ghirapur brought in. That is exactly the type of card that would be amazing in this type of game state. It would draw the Force of Will, leaving just a Spell Pierce or Omniscience in Jerry's hand. And here we have a 2 mana Infernal Tutor. We'll see if that draws a Spell Pierce and a Lotus Petal, or a Force of Will, or if Jerry's just going to let that resolve. It's a big decision. And got another Lion's Eye Diamond. That is a lot of fast mana right there. Jerry's still looking, hoping for a Show and Tell perhaps, to get that Omniscience in play. That would put him in a more solid defensive position, even though he'd walk away from his mana. He would no longer need mana for the rest of the game, all of his cards effectively costing 0. And Ponder's going to possibly find a Duress that quickly shot up to the top of the pile. There is going to need to be some discard in order to get out of this situation. Force of Will, very oppressive against the Storm player. Generally, you want to just resolve that one big spell, and Force of Will is just hanging out to say no sir, regardless if they have mana up or not. And we've got a Probe, and the mystery card is another Force of Will. Brutal. Jerry drawing defensive cards, buying him plenty of time here. So a Show and Tell for Omniscience would allow Jerry to effectively have 3 counter spells available for no mana. And of course, if Jerry can draw a Soul Land, then he will at least be able to hard cast one of those forces. So there are a lot of defensive lines that could be coming off the top of Jerry's deck. That could also lead to a quick win on his side. Once Omniscience is in play, Sneak and Show, so very dangerous. Of course, as a Sneak and Show player, you really have to make sure that you don't overvalue Omniscience. It's a really interesting dynamic. On the one hand, once it's in play, the deck is insane, but you don't want to value that as highly as, say, winning the game. I've seen plenty of Sneak and Show players very frustrated after they took a line to get Omniscience in play and just fizzled out. So you really have to be aware that the goal is to get Emrakul or Gristlebrand into play, and just Omniscience is quite literally not going to actually win the game. But in this case, it would be a welcome card to have on the battlefield, as it would allow both of those Force of Wills and the Spell Pierce to all be cast without needing to pitch cards for Force. And it looks like a Gitaxian Probe and Duress in hand, along with 2 Lion's Eye Diamonds, Ad Nauseam, and that last card perhaps is Dark Petition. So 2 bombs and at least 2 hard counters from Jerry. And there's another Lotus Petal, so 4 mana available. right. This has been quite an unusual game. Jerry's defensive hand just really making it difficult, but without any type of pressure, Storm generally finds a way. You know, a matchup like this, if those same cards or a similar hand was held by a Delver player who was chipping away for 3 or more per turn, a completely different dynamic. But knowing that Sneak and Show is either going to win or lose all in that one turn really does make such a huge difference here. And we have Duress starting to clear the way. Spell Pierce, not really an option. Gladly pay the 2 and get 2 for 1 with Duress. So it looks like one of those Force of Wills will be out of there. The other option is to take the Omniscience, and that shuts down Force's ability to pitch multiple cards. Oh, and look at that. It actually takes the Spell Pierce. A blue card drawn here leaves 2 forces, but Jerry has to play the land to turn the other force online, so we still have 2 forces, but we have perfect information. Alright, so 4 mana, 5 now with the untapped. Lion's Eye Diamonds everywhere. Still 2 Force of Will to play around with 2 bombs in hand. And Jerry electing to just play that land, trying to make it as painless as possible if he does have to Force of Will using Lotus Petals. Perhaps not the best line. The Storm player is generally going to really value the information. And we've got an end step Ad Nauseam. Strictly as bait at this point. There's no way Jerry can let this resolve. Even from 12 life, we're going to see a Force of Will. And that leaves just a Force and Omniscience in Jerry's hand. And it's going to be a question of how to get rid of that last counter spell. Cabal Ritual, another Brainstorm, and a Gitaxian Probe. And if Jerry could see those Lion's Eye Diamonds getting pushed back into the deck, generally not going to be very happy about that. Gitaxian Probe drawing a Lion's Eye Diamond and just digging, really trying to find some discard here. And there is a Duress, last card off of that Brainstorm. See what goes back on top. But this is likely going to be it here. With perfect information. That is a whole lot of Cabal Rituals over there. We've got the Duress. Going to grab the Omniscience, leaving that Force of Will stranded in hand, no blue card to pitch. And we've got Lion's Eye Diamond, Cabal Ritual. That goes from 5 up to 11 black, and then Dark Petition. And that is going to do it. Of course, Dark Petition will be able to get past in Flames there, replay all of those cards, and then eventually tutor up the lethal Tendrils. Jerry, very familiar with the deck, sees enough and is going to concede there. Well, thanks for watching. That was the match. And we have 4 rounds this week with Storm, and we'll see how that is able to do versus some of the best players in New England on some of the spiciest lists out there. This has been ELD for Brainstorm MTG. Thanks for watching.